The Sith Code required a master to kill any apprentice he had replaced. Darth Sidious enforced the rule with Count Dooku, ordering his death aboard a Separatist flagship at the end of the Clone Wars the moment a replacement was ready. Years before Dooku's death, and several times after, Sidious had the same opportunity with Darth Maul. He did not take it. Maul failed at the Battle of Naboo, came back years later as a rival to his former master, and spent the end of his life building a criminal empire in open defiance of the Sith Order. The code called for death, but the kill never came. Across canon and legends, Palpatine treated Maul differently from every other Sith he ever took. Count Dooku came to the dark side in his 70s, a former Jedi Master of the Royal House of Sereno, the one-time teacher of Qui-Gon Jinn, and a political aristocrat already disillusioned with the Republic he had served for decades. The reform agenda Dooku pursued as head of the Separatist movement was an extension of the politics he had arrived with, and Attack of the Clones shows him explaining it to Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis in terms a Jedi Master would recognize. Anakin Skywalker came in differently. He met Palpatine at the age of 9 and was raised inside the Jedi Order for 13 years under Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. He only became Palpatine's apprentice on Mustafar at 22 when he was already a Jedi Knight, a Clone Wars veteran, and Padme Amidala's husband. Palpatine engineered the fall through Anakin's existing attachments to other people. Maul, however, was something else. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, Maul was given to Sidious as an infant by a Night Sister named Caecina, his mother, who wanted to protect him from Mother Talzin's control. In canon, Maul was Talzin's son, and Sidious stole Maul from her at the age of 14, ending an alliance the two had kept for years. The Plagueis novel fills in the training. Maul was raised on a hidden Mustafar facility, attended by split-personality droids, and walked past the Jedi Temple on Coruscant as a child to see whom he was being raised to destroy. After his early years on Mustafar, Sidious moved him to the Orsis Academy on Plagueis' orders, where Maul was placed under a fallen combat master named Trezza. The exercises were structured to punish hesitation and to reward obedience. After his time on Orsis ended, Sidious ordered him to kill everyone at the academy who had taught him, and Maul did. The Legends novel Darth Plagueis establishes a fact that explains the rest of Maul's life. Sidious took the boy while an apprentice to Plagueis himself, named him Darth without his master's permission, and raised him on Mustafar and Orsis without Plagueis' full knowledge of the project. The Sith were supposed to have one master and one apprentice at any time. For the entire decade he spent training Maul, Sidious was working in violation of his own order's rule. Maul was not the first apprentice he took as a Sith master. He was the project Sidious ran while he was still an apprentice himself. The canon animated series The Clone Wars and the canon film The Phantom Menace confirmed the result. The Darth Maul who fought at Naboo had been under Palpatine's personal instruction for about a decade. The Sith unleashed on Naboo a red-skinned Horned Zabrak who killed Qui-Gon Jinn and was cut down by Obi-Wan Kenobi under the Royal Palace in Theed, had no prior life to fall back on. He had never been a Jedi or a Night Brother of the Dathomir tradition, and never anything at all before Sidious took him. Dooku was a political acquisition. Anakin was a cultivation of someone else's student. Every other apprentice in Palpatine's record came to him as a salvage job on another institution's work. Maul was the only person Palpatine had built from nothing. 1,000 years before the Clone Wars, a Sith Lord named Darth Bane was the sole Sith left after the Jedi destroyed his order. The lesson Bane drew was that attachment between Sith had been the cause of their destruction. Lords attached to their own names, their students, their rivalries, and associations had been unable to coordinate against an enemy that outlasted them. Bane wrote a rule to prevent a second failure of the Sith Order. Only two Sith would exist at any time. The Master would hold the dark side, while the apprentice would train to take it. When the apprentice grew stronger, he killed the Master and replaced him. This kept either Sith from growing too close to the other, since one would eventually have to kill the other. The code was meant to prevent exactly the kind of thing Palpatine would later do with Maul. Palpatine came into the Order by exactly the mechanism Bane had written. His master, Darth Plagueis, was a Mune Sith Lord with roughly a century of dark side research behind him. including experiments on using the Force to extend life and to generate it. Plagueis recruited Palpatine on Naboo as a young adult, broke him from his family, taught him the code, and prepared him to take the title the way the code laid out. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine recounts Plagueis' death to Anakin Skywalker in a private box at the Coruscant Opera, calling it a legend without naming himself as the apprentice who delivered it. Palpatine killed Plagueis while his master slept. In the legend's account, Palpatine waited until Plagueis slept and used the Force lightning to destroy the breathing apparatus Plagueis needed after an earlier assassination attempt. The two had been drinking together in Sidious's apartment that night, celebrating the political crisis that would elevate Palpatine to Chancellor. Plagueis trusted his apprentice. The killing only took moments, and Palpatine took his place as Sith Master. After that, he enforced the code on everyone who came after him. He recruited Count Dooku as his next apprentice, used him through the Clone Wars, and had him killed when Anakin Skywalker was ready to take his place. He trained Anakin, newly named Darth Vader, in the same code Plagueis had trained him in. The code did not cover what a master would do with an apprentice he had raised from childhood, because no master had ever done it. The rule of two was built around recruitment. The whole mechanism turned on both parties being complete selves before the training began. Palpatine took Maul as a child, and about a decade later, sent him against the Jedi Order at the Battle of Naboo. On the last day of the battle, Maul fought Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi in the reactor shaft of the Royal Palace in Theed. Qui-Gon died on Maul's saber, and Obi-Wan cut Maul in half, sending the pieces down the shaft. For 12 years, the galaxy believed Darth Maul was dead. The canon animated series, The Clone Wars, establishes what happened on Lotho Minor. The dark side of the Force had kept Maul's body alive through hatred alone. His severed lower half had been replaced by a spider-like mechanical construction, while his mind had fractured into hallucinations. What had once been a Sith apprentice spent more than a decade on Lotho Minor, feeding on what he could catch, loathing the Jedi, speaking to imagined copies of his former master, and forgetting his own name. During the same 12 years, the Night Sister Witches of Dathomir watched. Mother Talzin had never stopped tracking her stolen son. When the right moment came, she sent her son and Maul's brother, Savage Opress, to find him. Savage had been a night brother of the Dathomiri village before Talzin's blood magic transformed him into a warrior that she gave to Count Dooku as a Sith apprentice. Savage had since broken with Dooku and returned to Dathomir. He found Maul on Lotho Minor, pulled him out of the junk pits, and carried him home to Dathomir. Talzin restored Maul's mind through a Night Sister ritual and gave him new legs by combining magic and droid parts. When Maul could speak again, he told Savage he had been meant for great things, that Sidious had promised him a future. Whatever Maul had been to Sidious, Maul understood himself to have been the heir. Canon does not confirm whether Sidious knew Maul was alive during this period. The Bane Code was unambiguous on what a master should do once he learned a replaced apprentice had survived, but Sidious did nothing, whether out of ignorance or otherwise. For more than a year after the resurrection, Maul and Savage moved through the galaxy unopposed. On the planet Raydonia, they murdered civilians to draw Obi-Wan Kenobi into a trap. Death Watch, a Mandalorian militant faction, allied with Maul, and through that alliance, the Shadow Collective formed around him, bringing the Pike Syndicate, the Black Sun, and the Hutt clans under a single underworld banner. The Shadow Collective took Mandalore, engineering a crisis that installed Death Watch's puppet regime. Maul killed the Death Watch leader Pre Vizsla in single combat shortly afterward to claim the throne. A former Sith apprentice, officially discarded, built a rival power base inside the Republic that Palpatine was governing. Palpatine had every means to end it. He had his current apprentice Dooku, a separatist fleet, a grand army of the Republic at his covert command, and the whole Jedi Order positioned to act through a single classified report. He used none of them against Maul. Sidious had two apprentices in motion at once. Anakin was being trained the way the rule described, while Maul was being kept alive in defiance of it. Anakin Skywalker had been appointed to the Jedi Council as the Chancellor's personal representative, granted private access to the Chancellor's office, and trusted with a close friendship that no Jedi Knight of his rank would normally enjoy with the head of the Republic. The cultivation had started years earlier at the Coruscant Opera. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine tells Anakin about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise in a private box above a performance. He did so in the tone of a patient teacher and at the pace of a long game without disclosing any ownership or rank in the Sith Order he already held, speaking only of possibilities, losses that could be prevented, and powers that could be learned. Then, Maul killed Duchess Satine Kryze. Satine was the pacifist ruler of Mandalore, and years earlier, the woman Obi-Wan Kenobi had loved before his vows required him to leave her. Maul ran her through with the Darksaber in Kenobi's presence, deliberately to give the Jedi the same grief Maul had carried since Naboo. She died in Kenobi's arms. On Coruscant, in the private chambers of the Supreme Chancellor, Palpatine sensed the killing through the Force. He turned to Vice Chair Maz Amedda and ordered his personal shuttle prepared for departure. He went to Mandalore himself. Sidious arrived at Sundari, the domed capital of Mandalore, and walked into the throne room where Maul and Savage were waiting. The fight was brief, with Savage dying first, run through by both of Sidious's lightsabers in front of his brother. Maul fought longer before Sidious disarmed him, threw him across the room, and pinned him to the floor. Under the Sith Code, execution should follow. Instead, Palpatine paused to remind him of its most basic principle. There could only be two, which meant Maul was no longer the apprentice and had been replaced. Defeated and pinned, Maul begged for mercy. Palpatine refused, citing that mercy was not a Sith virtue. Palpatine obeyed the part of the code that protected him, but he set aside the part that would have ended Maul. Palpatine drew the fight out through Force lightning, standing over Maul and pouring the dark side through his own outstretched hands across an open span of time. When the torture stopped, Sidious informed Maul that he would be spared because the Sith Lord had other uses for him. Sidious had several options at Sundari. The doctrine mandated Maul's death. Releasing him would have left him alive, but free. Leaving a body would have given the Mandalorians a corpse and the satisfaction of finding it. Instead, Sidious chose to disobey the rule and took his former pupil with him. Sidious had no comparable history of leniency with Dooku or Anakin. The cruelty Sidious showed Maul that day looked like the prelude to an execution. The fact that he stopped short of one suggests something in him had already decided Maul would survive. Sidious did not return Maul to Coruscant. He took him to the Spire, a separatist prison on Stygian Prime, and personally appeared in the cell to address his former apprentice before summoning Dooku to take over the interrogation. Sidious put Maul in prison. The Spire was a separatist facility, not a Sith one, with no special containment for a former Sith apprentice trained on Mustafar and Orsis. The lack of any Sith-built restraints implied the actions of a master who could not be bothered to design something Maul could not escape. The bait plot Sidious later described to Dooku, that all of this had been engineered to draw out Mother Talzin, justified keeping Maul mobile and recoverable on a galactic stage. It may have also worked as cover for Sidious's lack of interest in killing his former apprentice. Maul's Mandalorian commandos, acting on the orders of Prime Minister Almec, broke him out, and a war spread across Zanbar, Ord Mantell, and a Shadow Collective supply outpost. The arc ended with Maul on Dathomir, allied with his mother, preparing to take the fight directly to Sidious. Palpatine told Dooku the whole sequence had been engineered to draw Mother Talzin out of hiding, where she could be eliminated. The counterexample is in Revenge of the Sith. Soon after the Son of Dathomir arc closed, Anakin Skywalker beheaded Count Dooku aboard the Separatist flagship Invisible Hand. The Count, disarmed and kneeling, looked up at his master in expectation of rescue. Palpatine ordered the kill. Anakin hesitated, obeyed, and took Dooku's head in a single motion. Later in the same film, when General Grievous raised concern over the loss of an ally, the Chancellor described Dooku's death as an acceptable cost of the larger plan, with a replacement apprentice already imminent. Palpatine ordered the kill from a chair across the room, did not travel, did not draw it out. The Son of Dathomir arc closed with Palpatine making a second personal journey on Maul's account. He arrived on Dathomir with Grievous and a detachment of Magna Guards, cloaked humanoid droids equipped with special weaponry. He descended into Mother Talzin's stronghold and dueled the witch while she possessed Count Dooku's body. When Sidious forced her out with Force lightning and she took physical form, Grievous ran her through. Maul fought alongside his mother and lost her. Maul escaped. Palpatine did not pursue. Sidious governed by remaining unseen, but he had crossed the galaxy 3 times on Maul's account. He never made a comparable journey for Dooku or Vader. Whatever drove him to appear in person for one discarded apprentice was not a thing the Sith Grand Plan required. A year after the Sundari throne room, in the last weeks of the Clone Wars, Republic forces under Ahsoka Tano laid siege to Mandalore to capture Darth Maul. Ahsoka was Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan, who had chosen to leave the Order after being wrongfully accused and later cleared. In the canon animated series, The Clone Wars, she tracked Maul into the undercity tunnels of Sundari and met him in person there. Maul had been waiting for someone else. He had manipulated the conflict on Mandalore as a trap to draw Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker to the planet, intending to kill Anakin before Sidious could turn him. Ahsoka came in their place. With his plan collapsing, Maul changed approach. In the tunnels and later in the throne room of the Sundari Royal Palace, he disclosed to a former Jedi the secret the Sith Order had spent 1,000 years protecting. He named Darth Sidious as the hidden Sith Master who had engineered the war. He extended his hand and asked her to join him against his former master. Ahsoka agreed on the condition that he tell her what he wanted with Anakin Skywalker. Maul revealed that the Master had been grooming Anakin for years as his next apprentice. He admitted that he had orchestrated the siege of Mandalore to draw Anakin there, intending to kill him before Sidious could claim his prize. Ahsoka drew her lightsabers and they fought, beginning in the throne room and ending on the support beams of the Sundari biodome above the city. Maul disarmed Ahsoka and gave her one final chance to join him, almost killing her when she refused. But she defeated him with his own weapon and caught him with the Force as he fell. Maul, preferring death to capture, asked her to let him drop, but Ahsoka held him until clone gunships arrived and took him into custody. Exposure ended a Sith. The Rule of Two governed numerical succession, but the Secrecy rule was what kept the Order alive. A master whose identity became known to the Jedi Council would, in any realistic timeline, be hunted and destroyed within days. Both of Palpatine's other apprentices honored the silence. Count Dooku, in his Geonosis interrogation of Obi-Wan Kenobi in Attack of the Clones, named only the alias Darth Sidious. The Council classified the report as separatist disinformation and set it aside. Dooku had obeyed the code in substance while seeming to break it in form. Darth Vader, across 23 years of service, never named the Master to any Jedi during the period the Master remained hidden. On Cloud City, he offered Luke Skywalker a future as Sith and revealed his own paternity, but the Emperor went unnamed. At Endor, Vader turned on his master to save his son, and only the three of them ever knew what passed in that throne room. Vader died loyal to the secrecy the Order demanded. The one who broke the silence was the one Palpatine had raised. His identity as Darth Sidious was known only to Plagueis, who was still his master. The Sith Grand Plan, the banking alliances he would corrupt, the separatist movement he would build, and the military-industrial chain that would produce the Clone Wars were all decades from readiness. Of the apprentices who lived long enough to identify the Master, only Maul had known him before the political machinery was assembled. Dooku knew a Sith Master existed and held the Chancellery. Vader knew the Emperor and the Chancellor. Only Maul knew what came before. The Secrecy rule was built on an assumption that apprentices could not disclose what they did not know. The Rule of Two, across 1,000 years, had produced apprentices recruited as adults into an order already concealed behind its mask. By the time an apprentice was trained, the Master's public face was fixed, and the exposed period was over. Back in the Sundari throne room, before the duel began, Maul said something that cut against the rest of the pattern. He described himself and Ahsoka as tools of greater powers, used by institutions above them that never disclosed their full plans. He presented his life under Sidious not as a relationship, but as exploitation without a clean ending. Both accounts were true at once. Maul would have interpreted his life as exploitation with no clean ending. Sidious's behavior, taken across decades, suggests a man who cannot bring himself to release the apprentice he had made. Killing Maul would have eliminated proof that the Emperor had been preparing to be a master before he had earned the right. The attachment Bane had warned against appears to have formed anyway. Years later, on the desert world of Tatooine, Maul found the Jedi who had cut him in half decades earlier. Obi-Wan Kenobi had been living on Tatooine for 17 years by then, in exile after the fall of the Jedi Order, guarding a boy the Jedi believe would one day answer for what happened to the Republic. The canon series Star Wars Rebels records the encounter. Maul tracked Kenobi to the Junlin Waste. The duel lasted seconds. Kenobi killed Maul with a clean cut through the body. In the seconds before he died, Maul asked the Jedi whether the boy Kenobi was protecting was the one who would end the Emperor. Kenobi confirmed that he was. Maul closed his eyes, spoke a line about the boy avenging them both, and died in Kenobi's arms. On Coruscant that day, Sheev Palpatine was ruling an empire whose reach Darth Bane could never have imagined. The Emperor had Darth Vader at his side, plans for a second Death Star already in motion, and every ambition the Bane Code had taught him to want was within reach. Palpatine lived for a few more years after Tatooine. Canon sources do not confirm whether anyone brought him news of Maul's death. It is possible nobody did. The standard account places the end of the Sith at Endor. In the canon film Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker refused to become the Emperor's new apprentice. Vader, no longer loyal to his master, lifted Palpatine above his head and threw him down a reactor shaft. By common reckoning, the Rule of Two died there. Under its own terms, the rule had died earlier. The exception had come at Sundari. Sidious had enforced the killing of apprentices throughout the Bane line, and never managed to kill the first one he had made. No one saw the contradiction during his lifetime. Palpatine never saw it at all. The Sundari throne room is where the Rule of Two first broke, but the man pinned to the floor that day carries a far longer story. The complete canon chronicle of Darth Maul traces the brutal training, the bisection at Naboo, the decades of madness on Lotho Minor, and the shadow empire he built out of a galaxy that had buried him. And for those fascinated by Darth Plagueis, a Moon Sith Lord whose experiments with life and death shaped everything Sidious became, his full story runs from his rise inside the Sith Order to the quiet night an apprentice chose to end him.